right, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us on the Hawaii Retirement Show. Today's episode, we got Chris Naffziger back. Thanks for joining us last time, Chris. Last time you were on, we talked, what was it, health and fitness in retirement, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, glad to have you back. How are things going?
Jason, I can't complain. Things are going great. How about you?
Good. And
Good, man.
right before we jumped on recording, we were chatting, and I want to get to this. As we're recording this on March 9th, the Bows, our baseball Rainbow Warriors, are sitting third place in the Big West. So it looks
That
like
sounds about right. They just started their conference schedule, and I went to opening night, and it was the best baseball moment I've probably had live in my entire life in a game that I wasn't actually playing in. They had a walk-off in the ninth inning, a big come from behind victory, and the place was going nuts. The less went off. They
nice.
had the new AstroTurf in the outfield. The kids were all over the field going nuts, spraying water all over the place, and the guy running the lights was turning the lights off and on. You missed it, man. You should have been there. You would have loved it. It was awesome. And I stayed all 9 innings. That was the other big story
Nice.
of that night, that I actually stayed the entire 9 innings. Usually I duck out around the sixth or seventh. So that was the other big story that came out opening night.
So what I gathered is I haven't been to a game yet, but I'm going Tuesday night, this Tuesday, because they play Chaminade and my nephew plays for Chaminade. And so I'm gonna
Awesome.
go check them
Awesome.
out then. But from what I gather for the Bows, our pitching is really good, right?
Yeah, at least as I've been able to follow it, looks like they got some pretty good arms. And there's a guy like this year that just started getting onto the field. His name's Freddie Rodriguez. So he's a middle reliever. I like him a lot. Keep an eye on him.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I think we should do a spin-off little podcast together and just talk Rainbow Warriors baseball, man.
Talking Bows baseball, I love it.
All right, so
Give me
let's
an excuse to go to more games anyway. It'll give me an excuse to go see more games.
right, right. All right, so let's jump in. So today, I think what we want to talk about is what does retirement even mean today, right? Because retirement's this word that it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And there's some people like maybe highly successful, motivated people that, cringe at the word retirement, like because they just need something to keep going and working towards. And so I just kind of want to talk about what retirement is, and then we'll get to a little later on. I know you got a unique story about something that I think most people probably don't even consider, which is a little mini retirement,
Yeah.
kind of in the middle of your life there. So let's start off with retirement in the traditional sense, right? And I think the word comes and the idea kind of comes mainly from kind of this old-timey work a factory, retire, with the family and not do anything else and kind of ride off into the sunset with your pension, which there's not too many pensions anymore unless you're working for the federal or state. And I think that's the traditional sense of retirement, maybe in the, 50s, 60s, 70s. And I think it's changed a lot. What are your thoughts there?
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think a lot of people, I'm just conjecturing here, but I think a lot of people are nervous and scared about retirement, not even from the financial planning side. I think more about the what in the world am I going to do now?
Mm,
Because you pour your hours of your life into your work and you have a routine and you go to work X number of hours a week for 30 to 40 years, and all of a sudden now you don't do that, and I think that scares a lot of people. And I don't think you and I are quite wired like that. We have a lot of other interests. We got a lot of things. So I'm pretty sure you and I, if we approach retirement in that way, I think you and I would be all right. I'm not worried about myself being bored in retirement because there's all
right.
kinds of things that I want to do. But I think not just from a financial side, but from a, what am I going to do with my time side? Retirement kind of makes people the traditional definition of retirement kind of makes people nervous.
Yeah, and I think in today's society, things are kind of fast-paced and fast-moving, and the old sense of retirement is very kind of dull. It's not very exciting. Um, you work all these years, and give up so much time and then just kind of set sail into the sunset there. But I think you're right where I run into a lot of people, if you're highly successful, you save a lot of money and your work kind of becomes your identity. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Whereas I think, and I'm just speculating, I'm not trying to say I know everything, but I think, 50s, 60s, you didn't associate yourself with your work wasn't your identity. It's just your job, right? And I think we're kind of in a society today where your work and your identity do kind of sync up a little more. And and I do think it's hard when you're grinding away and trying to make a good living to take the time and focus on the your hobbies, your relationships. So that way when it's time to make that jump, you kind of have those things in place that can kind of help fill your time, you know what I mean?
Totally. I think what we're going to get into is interesting because for decades, that has retirement has meant that one thing where it means that you work for X number of years and then you've got, whatever you want to do with your life after it. But I think people out there now, in a lot of ways, are changing the traditional work environment. And I think they're changing their traditional definition of retirement, and that's meaning different things. And so I'm excited to do this episode. I think we're going to delve into a lot of the evolution of the word retirement, what it can mean, and not just what it has always meant.
Yeah, for sure. And then there's this big I don't know if you're familiar with it, but there's a big movement. It's been going on for a while now called FIRE, Financial Independence
Yeah.
Retire Early. And essentially
Hmm.
what that is like this idea around retirement where you just kind of pinch every penny and save every dime for and work as hard as you can for a short period of time, and then you kind of parachute because you compressed all those working years and all that grinding down and all that saving, right? And then you kind of parachute off. There's just a lot of ways to go about it, and I think a part-time job in retirement is is very popular. I think it's a great thing. You're a golfer, you go work at the golf course. And it's not that you need the money, but it gets you out, it's social, and it does that money coming in kind of provides some like stability in your mind as like, all right, I don't have to rely so much on my retirement. I got this job, even though it pays, less than I was making. So I think it just comes in all different flavors, right?
Yeah, and another thing I would add there is I think there's sometimes a gap. Like, let's say you've made it to 50 or 55, and you know that you have a good enough financial picture that you don't really need to work, but there might be a need to just to have health benefits or have benefits
Very
to
true.
bridge that gap. So I've worked in my time in retail. I've worked with people that are working. A, because it's kind of fun, like for the reasons you mentioned, just to get out there, just to be social and to have something to do, but also just to cover that gap in their benefits.
Mhm, for sure. And then we get to the concept of kind of somewhere along the way in life, and I'm not arguing against this. We've decided that you have all the fun and adventure in the beginning, in childhood and young adolescence, and then at the end when we're kind of old and we have the money to travel, but we're kind of slowing down. And you took a different approach here, which you decided somewhere along in the middle, hey, I'm gonna take a year off, take this mini retirement, and kind of see what that's like. So I want to get into that. Maybe just start us off, tell the listeners kind of a little bit about what that was and how you kind of thought about that decision to take that mini retirement midlife.
Totally. So I think it's kind of a hybrid approach between the fire, the extreme, working, save as much money as you can, and then not having to work and being able to do whatever you want for the rest of your life. I wasn't willing or able enough to go so full in that you would need to in order to, you know, have fire. So what I did was just basically work hard for a couple of years, save up enough money that I could take a year off of work and go traveling. And the genesis for this idea, I think somehow along the line, I got really into watching YouTube videos about people living out of their cars. I
Mhm.
don't recall how this started, but somehow after a while, I found myself annoying my wife by watching so many YouTube videos about people living a van life culture, just living out of their cars. And I thought that was the coolest thing. I still do. And so I just started to get burnt out at work, and just the idea just kind of naturally evolved in my head. Like maybe I could do something like this. I know my wife now at the time was my girlfriend at the time. that was the most complicated part was, well, how are you gonna go and travel for a year and have this awesome, amazing adventure and leave my girlfriend, who's now my wife, at home working and living a normal life? So that was the biggest challenge. But luckily, I remember telling her, I don't have to go. I don't have to do this. And she said, yes, you do, because you're going to drive me nuts. If you don't do this. And she's
Right.
supportive. And that's one of the many reasons I love her, is that she gave me the space to go do this. So yeah, that was kind of the genesis of it. Basically, I just wanted to take a year off to go travel, and I think it originated, if I'm thinking correctly in my head, back in high school. A buddy of mine and his older brother took 3 weeks and just went and drove around in their parents' van and saw a bunch of stuff. And I remember thinking how cool that was. And I think that maybe was always in the back of my head, and that led to me saying, "Well, I'm going to do the same thing." Obviously, for a lot longer than they were able to at the time, but yeah, that was kind of how it all transpired, or it came to be.
Okay, so I'm a little bit familiar with what you did there just because our relationship and so you jumped in the Nissan Xterra. And
Correct.
did you go to all the continental 48 states there?
I didn't make it to all 48. I think I counted it up, but if you want to count ones, like I think I drove through Maryland for 10 minutes, if you want to count stuff like that. I think I touched, around 35 of the 48 states. I know, so I bought the Xterra in Cleveland and then drove it to my parents' house in Indiana and spent some time, modifying it, ripping out the back seat, making it so that I could actually store all my crap in the back of it. And I bought a rooftop tent so I could put that on top. And that took maybe 2 or 3 weeks to kind of get the whole thing set up. And then I just kind of went in a big loop all the way around the country, all the way up to the Northeast, and then basically kind of followed the coastal states pretty much all the way around, all the way through Montana, Wyoming, and then finished up in the Dakotas and Minnesota and Nebraska. I think were the last four states that I went to, and covered 30,000 miles. I know that that number was just about exact, 30,000 miles in roughly 11 months or so.
Hmm. Yeah, it's super interesting. I think it takes a lot of I think there's probably a few people who would think about this, and I've seen the YouTube videos of people living out of their vans, and it can look very glamorous. I often watch those and think there's got to be a lot of times in that lifestyle that's hard and not very glamorous. But I think a lot of people see it. It looks fun. I mean, I think it would be a blast to do. I don't know that I would do it. And that kind of gets me to the next point of kind of when you're thinking about, a midlife retirement, or I mean, they offer these like through employers too as a sabbatical leave, right? Where you're not going to
Mhm.
get paid, but you go on this. But there are trade-offs, right? There's trade-offs to everything in finances and everything in life. That's economics, right? There's trade-offs to things, and there's opportunity costs associated with it. So if you want to just talk through kind of, you know, how did you plan financially? How did you budget? And then, did you think a lot about, what you're giving up to do this, kind of year off financially?
Yeah, so it was kind of a blessing and a curse. At that point, I was beginning my obsession, or I had begun my obsession with personal finance, and so I knew enough to understand the concept of opportunity cost with retirement planning, and so I knew that I was going to be giving up a year of income, and that's not the end of the world if you look at it through that lens of that year. But then if you think about what that money could have turned into 20, 30, 40 years down the road, that starts to be real numbers and real big numbers. And so
Mm.
that was a decision that I had to make. But like I told you earlier, just I was obsessed with it so much. And I do feel like my own personal view is that you just get one, shot at this life. And so you just
Mm.
got to, not everything always has to be planned around what's the most optimal way to do this financially. So at some point, you just throw caution in the wind and just go do it and live your life. And so, yes, there was an opportunity cost for the money that I was missing out on with my earnings for that year and what that would turn into down the road. But I understood that, eyes were wide open, and I still wanted to do it. I think the money kind of came from a combination of different things. Mostly it was just through working hard and working overtime and saving up enough money and letting that money earn money. And then I paid, I think, about 10 grand for the car, a couple grand for the tent, and then about $1,000, I think, for my refrigerator and some solar panels and stuff like that. So the big costs were about $10,000 to $15,000. Now you don't have to do all this; you could do things way cheaper than I did, but
Sure.
this is just what I spent. But and then I think after all that, I had about 15 to $20,000 as my fund to
Mm.
last as long as I could. And so I think if I recall, my budget that I was aiming for a month was about $1,500. So I was trying to, if I went over that, it was no big deal, or under that, whatever. But 1,500 was kind of my over under per month. And this was actually right at the beginning of COVID. I did this gap year right, when COVID started. So initially, I had plans to try to go see some SEC football games and go to baseball games. And of course, none of that happened. I was wearing a mask pretty much every time I went and did anything. So that stuff, it made it cheaper though, that I wasn't able to do all these things that would have cost me a lot of money. But I ended up focusing more on just going out into national parks and to national grasslands and things like that, and actually exploring some of the more natural beauty that the country has to offer, and which is also more cost effective. And if I'll put a plug in for the National Parks Pass, if you ever are going to do something like this, I bought that pass for I think $100 or something around there, and I visited, I don't know, I think it was like 20 or 30 national parks, and so that money that would have cost me $500 to $1,000 to actually go see all those parks
Mm.
had I not purchased that pass. So one finance savvy move that I made was getting that national parks pass. But yeah, about 10 to 15,000 for the startup cost, and around 20,000 was my budget. But it could be done cheaper, and you could spend all the money you wanted to on something like this as well.
Right, right. I mean, you could look at it as, I mean, you could take a month off. It doesn't have to be a year, or you could
Sure.
take 2 years, right? It's like kind of, as my dad would say, is the juice worth the squeeze, right? And you figure out what,
Love that phrase.
yeah, you got to figure out what works for you if you're going to do this kind of thing, if you feel compelled to do this type of thing.
Yeah.
How old were you when you did it? How long was that?
Oh, Jason, I'd rather not say my age on this podcast. I don't want people to know that number. No, I would have been around 42 or 40, 41, 42, somewhere around
Well,
there. And just real quick, to circle back before you, sorry to interrupt you, but you mentioned it kind of being hard. It may not be as glamorous as it seems. That reminded me as you're talking about that, especially early on. I remember it took me a while to settle into rhythm and understand like where I could stay and where I couldn't and how to approach this thing. And I had some tough days because you basically, yes, you live in your tent or you live in your car, which is fine, but everybody, most people are blessed to have a place where they go back to and call home. And
mhm.
so for, a year, I basically didn't have that. And that could be tough some days if things aren't going your way, you're not having a good day. You just kind of want to go and see your loved ones or go home and, play with your dog or see your loved ones. And I wasn't able to do that. Not that I'm saying it wasn't all worth it, but that there were certainly, like you pointed out, it wasn't all as glamorous. You watch the videos and everyone
Right.
makes it look like it's the best thing ever, especially early on when I was kind of figuring it all out. There were some challenging times and some tough days that I went through, but on the whole, well worth it. And if you're even considering doing something like that, I would encourage anyone to do it. But yes, there are some tough moments that you'll encounter for sure.
Right. And then the reason I asked your age is I think, that you hear the midlife crisis, right? But what I'm thinking about is like, for most people, your 20s is, you know, having fun, getting credentialed, getting educated, and kind of dipping your feet in the water of the world, right? And your 30s is kind of put in the work, right? You're real, I mean, your 30s is when life is really coming at you. You might be getting married, you might have kids, you're trying to get ahead at your job and all that. And I feel like there's naturally this break, and I'm experiencing it now, naturally this break when you kind of get to 40, you're kind of like you got the boat up and planing, you know what I mean? And you're kind of
Mm-hmm.
on the road. And I think it's a good spot, I feel like, to take that kind of breather from things and knowing that you can come back, right? Because you got educated, you got credentialed, you put in work, you have a resume. And so you're not taking this break, without of putting in the work previously to come back to something, right?
I think everyone's situation is different. For
Sure.
me, I was working in retail, so I was pretty sure I'd be able to get back into the retail world. And so it wasn't that scary to leave
Mm,
the job. And although it was there was some nerves about getting back into it. What was I going to do? That was always in the back of my mind as I was on my road trip, but it all worked out just fine. Everything seems to always just work out.
sure.
So yeah, there's some nerves around doing something like this, but I think for other people, like my wife, for example, is works for the federal government, so there's a it would have been way more challenging for her to do something like this for a full year. But I think your point is well taken that you don't need to do a full year. Like a lot of companies or government, city, state, federal, whatever it is, have policies where you can take advantage of sabbaticals. And so, if nothing else, if you don't have the situation where you can do as long of a break as you might want to, I think that for a lot of folks, it would be a nice thing to take a look at the sabbatical policy and give yourself a break from work because I think that's just a tough way to go through life is just to work for so many years straight and then to not work. And so
Right.
any type of loophole, any kind of company policy that allows you within the rules to be able to take advantage of some time, maybe not even to travel, maybe you just want to get certified to be a yoga instructor. Maybe you want to learn a second language, or you want to learn how to play the piano. These
Right.
are things
Right.
that I
Right.
might like to do, by the way. But that you take some time off just to focus on yourself and do something a little bit different, shake things up. Would be, I think, a good thing for a lot of people's mental health.
Yeah, and I want to throw a counter argument out there just because I know there's individuals that just love working. Maybe they're building a business or they just love their field and they love grinding. And I think the word burnout gets used a lot, but some people, hey, if you like working, like I forget the Jerry Seinfeld thing about he did this commencement speech or whatever, and he said like why is it so bad that people say you work too much? If you like working, you work, right? So there's
Yeah,
everybody's different, and
totally.
some people might think of hear this, they might hear this idea and scoff at it and say no way, no way,
Mhm.
never would do it, don't think it's a good idea, and that's fine too, right?
100%. I wouldn't suggest that the way I do things or you do things is a one size fits all approach. I just am suggesting that this worked a lot for me, and I think it
Sure.
can work a lot of others. But God bless you if working fulfills you and makes you really happy. And I know for a lot of people it does. Then have at it.
Right,
That's
right.
just not the way I'm approaching my life. But I would never try to force what I believe is the way I want to live my life onto others. I'm just putting out. I think you are too. Just putting out a
Yeah, yeah,
suggestion like take a second look at it, take a critical look, and maybe shake it up a little bit if you are inclined to do so.
sure. Okay, so definitely sounds really cool. I'm intrigued. I was intrigued when I watched you do it, and you documented everything. I think you can still find the videos. It's called Overland 365 Project.
Overland Project 365 is
Overland
my
Project.
YouTube channel. So I was on the fence, I watched all these videos and they all document everything. And I was on the fence about whether I wanted to do that because there was a part of me that said, I just want to go out and enjoy it. I don't want to worry about filming everything and making videos. And so for the first quarter of my trip, all the way from Indiana through New England, I didn't video anything. I didn't document. I took a lot of pictures, of course, but there was nothing to film. There's no YouTube video to make. And then we stopped and stayed with an old friend of mine in New York. And this is when my Marissa actually came up for this portion of the journey. We were in New England for a couple weeks together, and we stopped at a friend of mine's place in upstate New York. And she just said, "What? Just do it. I mean, just film it and make videos because if nothing else, it'll just be a nice documentary for you." And in fact, every once in a while, if I'm have 10 to 20 minutes, I'll go back and watch, one of the episodes I made, and it always makes me smile because I'll remember things that I thought I would never forget, and it just kind of faded in my memory. So yeah, it's I'm glad I did it. I wish I had filmed the New England portion of the journey, but everything from Florida all the way through. I have basically a YouTube video pretty much for every state or every couple of states that I visited, and it's really cool to go back and watch, and for people that were interested in what I was doing to get a kick out of seeing me on my road trip as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, are there any ideas now that you got your Kerouac on the road trip out of the way? Are there any other ideas for mini retirements, or can you think of another instance, road tripping is one thing, but I always like the idea, it pops in my head of doing the fire watch in Montana for a season.
Oh yeah, I remember you talked to me about this.
Yeah, that
Definitely.
always piqued my interest, but do you have any ideas on your radar for another mini retirement? Or are you
Well, I don't know if this might have to wait until Marissa and I are kind of fully retired, but and this is more my dream than hers, but I think she's into it as well. I've always wanted to go to every major league ballpark, and
mm,
so I think down the road we'll at some point, whether it's a mini retirement or after we're fully retired, we'll kind of block it off and say, all right, this year we're going to spend 3 weeks or 2 weeks or whatever the time is and go in these couple of states and see a game at every ballpark in this area of the country because you and I both love baseball, and
sure.
I would just love to see. I've been to a handful of all the parks, but I haven't even been close to all of them. So I would love to do that. That's definitely, and I actually have a bucket list on my phone. If something pops up that I'm like, wow, that would be great, I put that on my phone, and I actually have a list, and I check them off when I've done it. But the other kind of gap year or mini retirement goal that I have, and this one's relatively real. I'm not as insane about it as I was my original gap year road trip, but I really am fascinated by the Appalachian Trail. I have been for
Hmm,
years. And so, what I intend to do is I would like to turn 50 on the Appalachian Trail. And
hmm,
so, I'm socking money away right now to do a full pass through the Appalachian Trail. People approach it in different ways. They do section hikes or there's lots of different ways to do it. You could do a state and then leave or whatever you get. I want to do a through hike all the way from Georgia all the way up through Maine. And it's, I think, 2,100 miles, thereabout
hmm.
roughly. Average, it takes people, if they're going to stick with it and do it, usually about anywhere between 3 to 6 months.
Right.
And so, I'm still 5 years away, but that's kind of the thing that I have targeted is trying to start in March, April-ish is when most people start if they're going to start and do a full pass through hike. And that way, I think if I looked at the map correctly, I would turn 50 somewhere around Virginia. And so
Mhm.
that's my next big thing that I'm pretty sure I'm going to at least try. I mean, a lot of people, I think the success rate for people that actually try to hike it all the way through is, I don't know, 1 in 4 or 1 in 5, something like that, and
Really?
actually do it. But I'm pretty intent on giving it a shot. And so that's the next big thing on my radar.
Very cool. Yeah, and I think this is a good episode just talking about, you know, being intentional and having a plan for our listeners or whoever's thinking about this type of thing. Plan ahead, understand the trade-offs and opportunity costs, and if something piques your interest, don't wait till the end, right? Don't wait till that traditional retirement. As long as you have your ducks in a row and you can make it happen, yeah, take a chance, have an adventure, right? I think adventure is hard to come by in modern society. It's very comfortable, and I think it's good to do those kind of things. Any last words before we kind of close it out here?
Just to tack on to what you were just saying, my view is I think life is short. And so I just realized over the last 10, 15 years that I didn't want to be a guy that said, someday I'm going to do this, or one day maybe I'll get to do that. And that doesn't mean I can be wildly irresponsible and just do whatever I want all the time.
Hmm.
But if something's important to me and I really want to do it, I I don't want to take for granted that I'm going to get another day to be able to do it. So I try to live my life. Like I said, if something is important and I really want to do it, then I'm going to try to figure out a way to do it based on the assumption that maybe I won't get to 10, 20, 30, 40 years down the road. I think a lot of people, myself included, sometimes say, oh, maybe someday I'll be able to do that. Well, who's to say that you will get to down the road? And so, like I said, if it's something really important, I would encourage anyone to actually, like I said, make a plan, figure out how to make it come off, and go ahead and do it, and take advantage of the opportunity while it's there, because you never know how many days you get on the calendar in your life. So that's I guess the way I would kind of leave this is to try to take advantage and do these things that are important to you when you have the chance, and not just assume that, 10, 20, 30 years down the road you'll be able to.
Chris, appreciate you coming on again. Chris Naffziger. If anybody wants to get in touch with you for personal training here on Oahu, or maybe they got questions about doing this mini retirement thing, how can they get a hold of you?
Yep. So a couple different things. If you're interested in just following my journey, because now I'm actually rehabbing a couple of Jeeps. That's a whole nother conversation.
Hmm.
But I'm putting those on my YouTube channel. That's Overland Project 365. And then on the fitness coaching side, my website is chrisisnotnice.com, or you can find me on Instagram as my social media platform of choice. It's Chris is not nice 808. That's the ways that you can find what I'm up to.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, listening to the Hawaii Retirement Show. If there's anything you'd like us to talk about on the show going forward, email it over to aloha@hawaiiretirementshow.com, and we'll catch everyone on the next one.
The opinions and statements presented on this show are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations. Never make any investment or financial decisions based on information offered on this show without first consulting your financial, legal, or tax advisor. All economic and performance information mentioned on the show is historical in nature and is not indicative of any future results. All indices mentioned on this show are unmanaged and cannot be invested in directly. All information is believed to be from reliable sources. However, we make no representation as to its completeness or accuracy. Lastly, all opinions expressed by Jason Cutitta and any guests on the show are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of or are endorsed by ToBA Financial. For Jason Cutitta, investment advisory services are offered through ToBA Financial LLC, a registered investment advisor offering advisory services in the state of Hawaii and in other jurisdictions where exempt from registration.